Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this talk on healthcare. I'd like to just thank everyone for joining today. I can see people are still joining. It's fantastic to see you all. And today we're going to be exploring a little bit about AI in healthcare. Technology promises to revolutionize everything in clinical decision support to patient engagement and operational efficiency. But as with any transformational technology, the journey from theoretical potential to the practical implementation is complex. And across all industries, we hear a lot of hype about AI and its potential. So in order to sort of reach for the stars, sometimes we have to do some of the basics. And I'm very lucky to have two amazing people to discuss this with today. Before we get going, we're going to have some fun with Slido today. If you'd like to participate, the details are on the screen now. You can scan the QR code. And we'd like to just ask the question in terms of how you're engaging with generative AI tools now, ChatGPT or other equivalent, how much you use that by day to day. And while you're doing that, I'd like to just give a little mention about Zühlke in case you haven't heard of us. We were incorporated in 1968, and we work within tightly regulated industries. We have a deep expertise and experience in the relationship between hardware and software, and then particularly within MedTech. But we also work within the railway system, within airports, and across other industry sectors. And we often get involved to solve difficult, complex problems. So in order to just explore that today, we've asked a couple of amazing people to join us. My name is David Ellerman. I'm the Chief of Software Engineering for Zühlke. I've been in the industry a long time. I split my time between doing some work with, I'm a professor at UCL in London, but also work extensively with on projects concerning AI and transformation. And I'd like to just invite Lavanya and Guido to introduce themselves because they can do it much better than I can. So perhaps Lavanya, if you'd like to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experiences.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Lavanya Isenman. I work at Sonova. Specifically, right now, I head an academy for our audiologists. These are our clinicians in store bringing our technologies to our customers. But my background is in behavioral science. I'm a behavioral strategist, which means I try to bring the human perspective into the strategy and execution in different environments.
Guido?
Yeah, and let me follow Lavanya. Hi everyone, this is Guido Matthews from Bayer. I'm based in Berlin, Germany. I'm in the healthcare industry since more than 20 years, working in the AI space or with AI, especially around medical imaging, now since I think 7-8 years. Within Bayer, I take care of medical imaging, data and AI research for our pharma portfolio, our radiology portfolio, and also for product development. And very happy to be here today and to exchange a little bit on where healthcare and AI are going.
Thank you both, and thanks again for joining us. Just before we dive into the main conversation, it would be fun to look to see if anybody's contributed to the poll already yet. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Several people, 35%. It's obviously people are filling it in now. But isn't it interesting and not particularly surprising that only a few people, a very low number, are rarely once a week or less. We're starting to see these tools become anything from sort of a structured or intelligent search into something that is helping us with our daily work. And then, of course, there is this promise stroke threat of automation, transformation, and replacement of jobs and everything else. There's very much a sort of a technological and human factor in the tool set. But AI has existed a lot longer than the last couple of years and all the fuss and hype. It's now got its own acronym, good old-fashioned AI. And we've just been sort of riding the wave of the branding of machine learning, which is an extension of statistical analysis for a number of years. And now we've got the sort of the generative AI boom. And I would be going to be interested to explore, how our guests today have utilized AI, how it's been effective for what they've been doing, but also the problems and the issues that they've had in doing that in a technological sense, but also in a human sense in terms of adoption. Okay, so just to get the discussion going before we dive in, Guido, Lavanya, I'd love to understand your perspectives on where we stand today, and what do you think the biggest misconception about AI in healthcare that limits real implementation is? Perhaps Lavanya, if we go to you first.
This is a very interesting question. It's a bit salient right now in my organization because last year we had this big launch of a very highly enabled, AI-enabled hearing aid. And with that came the challenge of what can I bring forward and what are the misconceptions that our clinicians and our customers might have when it comes to AI. And the biggest misconception is that it's something brand new, something new technology I need to be cautious about. Especially in the medical space, it's going into my ear. What it's going to do is what about my data, so on. And I smile at this because the term itself was coined about 70 years ago. I think it was John McCarthy in 1956 or something to that effect. The term has been around for quite a while. Work has been going on in this space for quite a while. I still remember in early 2000s, for those of you who are Jeopardy fans, in one of the episodes, they brought out IBM's Watson, their AI-enabled computer, and it won that episode of Jeopardy, where it basically competed against human competition. And that was one of the first times I had, growing up, seen AI in a normal human setting. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions I wanted to kind of overcome for both our customers using our technology and our clinicians selling or positioning the technology, that AI itself is not the big bad wolf that is new on the block. It has been around. You use it every day. The second you open Google Maps, you're putting your information into AI, your home address, where do you want to go. It has been around for a while. You use it without even knowing about it. So that was one of the first foundational things I tried to bring forward.
So, sorry, just before we go to Guido, Lavanya, just a very quick follow-up. Did you notice, because obviously one of the primary things you've done recently is the AI-powered hearing aid. Did you see any difference in reaction from the audiologists that you work with? Because obviously there's the sort of patient attitude. They might just think they're getting something new and cool. That might be potentially more accepting, but in terms of the audiologist, did you experience any sort of change in attitude from them in terms of maybe getting something that utilized AI?
There are two biases that I encountered when it came to clinician or audiologist attitude. One is a little bit more maybe specific to the industry. We have a new launch almost every 2 years. So it's almost a cyclical, systematic process. And every time we say this is the best new technology for our customers. So there's that, yet another best new technology. The second is, what does this really mean? How does this translate into customer experience? So in this particular case, one of the things, because there is a new depth of AI, in this case it was DNN, and it is using more real-time information, it's more generative in nature. one of the main things we had to do was, in this particular case, hearing is believing. So we actually had a set of clinicians or audiologists in this case who have hearing loss test the device prior to its market availability for 2 months. And we used peer testimonials to showcase to other clinicians and audiologists that this is in fact a solution that your own peers who understand, who have been in the field for a while, see and hear the difference than traditional hearing aids. So in this particular case, what we wanted to do was create a system of belief by increasing the response efficacy. Response efficacy is a term that basically states that I believe this is a solution that solves a particular problem.
That's fascinating. And Guido, back to the original question. What do you think in your field? And perhaps you can elaborate your field a little bit more in terms of the promise and perhaps the misconceptions.
Yeah, so building on what Lavanya was also introducing regarding AI is around since a while. But I think we also, in the early days when it really came up and became more visible for all of us, and that might have been maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was the big bang. Radiologists are not needed anymore. So if someone is studying medicine, they should do whatever discipline, but maybe not choose radiology. And I think quickly after already a year or 2 years after this saying was out, there was realization maybe that was a trap and it was the wrong direction. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is, at least for the time now where we are in, and most likely even for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and maybe even forever, that AI will fully replace the human healthcare professionals, right? So, so if we leave this aside, I think then also the next level is of misconception that AI is solving everything. So we have seen a lot of time of experimentation, I would call it. Yeah, trying out. We could do fancy things. We could paint a cat or compare and differentiate between a tomato and a cat from computer vision and image recognition perspective. But I think meanwhile we come also across industries to the point, so what is the problem we try to solve? What is the customer demand that is out? And really understanding if and what type of AI has the potential then to solve the problem or to satisfy the customer. So I think building on that, there are still sometimes the traps thinking about shooting with everything and use AI first. But the transformation is here, having AI built in, having maybe industry AI available, but also make it possible for the customer to build on that. And if we can achieve that, then we are a big step forward.
I noticed that, Guido, you said recently that you'd seen large numbers of FDA cleared AI tools, and yet the adoption has been somewhat limited. Now, something about adoption really interests me because there's obviously different aspects of the reason why there can be inertia within industry, and I just wondered what your thoughts were as to why the uptake of those devices have been somewhat limited.
So there are many reasons. Yeah, first of all, it starts with trust. Yeah, and also confidence. We have a level of education. Sometimes there are simple things like investment cycles on customer ends when we think about a larger hospital or even smaller private practices. So when they do invest in certain things. On the other side, barriers in the data flow. Yeah, so we have maybe tools and solutions available, but they have not in every situation the right infrastructure available that they really can bring their power to the table. And that is what we see also being in radiology with Bayer, world market leader, and trying to bring digital solutions to the market. It's very often the implementation in the hospital environment is still where we struggle. And therefore, I think get the foundations right first, having also an environment where data are actionable and getting data AI ready is also very important. And this is what we will see now accelerating significantly, I think, especially since now the gap of what the power of AI is showing us today, is inviting us to improve and increase the readiness of the infrastructure. So that's I think one of the things.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because it seems to me that there is this distinction between the possibility that people's attention is attracted to, and the reality that sometimes experiments work really well in isolation, and even funding can be obtained separately for things because they sit separately from the rest of the organization. And in the moment somebody says, yes, we want to scale this out, or we want to use this across different departments, or whatever that means, then you hit a whole series of corporate, departmental, and human problems in terms of adoption, because it's not just about people's attitude. That's one aspect, but it can sometimes be about the actual capability of an organization to take on new things. Is that something either of you have experienced?
Yes, and so that's in constant co-creation with customers. Also, we have these discussions, but also if you look into the own organizations, right? So having that readiness, having that understanding, breaking data silos, and maybe looking then again on the latest discussion regarding the European health data space. There are sector specific, and let's talk about healthcare here. Definitely, there are sector specific shortcomings that we have to make the data actionable, taking it from the patient journey perspective, right? So it starts still that we have a lot of paperwork that we sign. Some more advanced hospitals already, when I go to an MRI for my knee, for instance, I have already a digital patient informed consent that somehow is then connected with the rest of the data flows. But it ends typically in the hospital or in the department itself. And so it helps to automate there, but it helps not most likely the physician in particular, or the supporting staff in the hospital, really to build on decision support. And to achieve that, again, the data foundation is something that we need to build in a better way.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of fundamental to anything, isn't it? I think that an organization, in order to be able to utilize any advanced forms of data, analytics, AI, whatever we want to call it, you need the foundations in place. And it's very often saying to people, you've got to do a bit of a back to basics, isn't necessarily the message you want to lead with, because they want to be excited by the prospect of some of the new and exciting things that are out there, and want to feel they can reach and touch it without feeling that they are going to be bogged down. So I think we're probably going to return to this throughout the rest of the conversation. This concept of back to basics and things. Just before we move to the next question, just a reminder that the Slido things that I shared earlier, please, you're welcome to submit questions throughout the conversation. We've got about 20 minutes or so of Q&A space at the end. So please submit any questions that you have. Maybe something has triggered a thought in you in the discussion thus far, and maybe you want to wait until the end, but please, all questions are very welcome. So just returning back, Lavanya, I'm interested in, we've got this sort of human issue that we've been kind of touching on in terms of the problem of transformation and sort of inertia to change on the sort of the big corporate side, and then you've got the approaches that you've taken with behavioral science and apply in terms of driving to adoption. And yes, they're different things, but I'm fascinated by this human element. And I just wondered, how you've brought as a behavioral scientist, how you've brought that into the process for adoption?
It's a really pertinent question right now, because since December of last year, October last year, the pace and velocity with which we have progressed in this specific area of generative AI is massive. It's, for me, unprecedented. I have never seen the pace at which we have gone. Which brings the question, how do we ensure that the people who are at the receiving end are also able to match that speed to a certain extent? Because to Guido, to the point you made, we might have technology, but how do you ensure that our hospitals are actually leveraging this amazing thing that is available at their fingertips? Now, from a human perspective, I like how you said this, David, because we often forget or drop off the human part of the, and we focus very much on the artificial intelligence piece. And I truly believe the terminology should be human-driven artificial intelligence. From an adoption perspective, you can go back to basics when it comes to behavioral science lens. In the simplest sense, imagine a triangle. You have the behavior shift you want to see, which is adoption in this case. You essentially have the motivation. So what is it that would motivate the individual? Then you have your ability. Do they feel confident enough to actually be able to? And ability does not completely equate to skills or competencies. The actual, you've done your 3 years or 4 years of engineering degree, etc. Just the self-confidence that you have enough of capability to do it. And then the prompt you want to give, the nudges you want to put in place for that behavior to actually happen. So I can give you a very tangible example of from adoption, at least from before we can have our customers adopt, we need our salespersons, which is the audiologist, to adopt the technology. So one of the prompts we created, so the triangle that I mentioned, is one thing I already mentioned, which is the motivation. Our audiologists are in this field because they want to help individuals. So the response efficacy was very important by showcasing and proving that there is a certain impact on individuals with moderate to severe hearing loss, which is what we did with their peers testing the device and us collecting testimonials and making that available to their clinical peers. This was very important because testimonials in this case was very much from a clinician's lens as much as it was a customer's lens. So the language was very much in sync. So that was where we tried to drive the motivation. You can truly help your customers with this new technology we're bringing forward. The second was the ability. We did provide them with a holistic, both hands-on and self-paced assets where they were able to upskill themselves. We also provided on-the-job aids, which was actually our third part. We provided on-the-job nudges for them to be able to basically simplify the ability to bring the solution to their customers. These were in the form of checklists, quick guides, etc., of how can they have this conversation very easily and simply. What are the talking points you can use to talk to your customers? So this is a very practical example of how these three kind of work together. And while we measured a lot of intrinsic KPIs, because like any study, you have to measure your KPIs, we did find a one-to-one correlation, a pretty strong correlation between putting this in place and the audiologist's adoption of the solution.
That's it. It's interesting because I'd noticed you'd mentioned about the nudges and the effectiveness of that, and it just brings home how very basic human communication can still be so incredibly effective. And Guido, did you notice any, just staying with this human element for a moment, from the point of view of the, you mentioned the patient journey, and just to build on Lavania's point about this is about quality of care, this is about increasing the patient experience. You talked about the data flow and having an electronic health record available, the privacy ensured, but the flow to go from A to B. You talked about the MRI in your knee, which is pretty funny because I had one of those about a year ago. And how this process needs to sort of sink into a fundamental sort of data platform ecosystem of exchange, a secure exchange of information. Yet we don't really see that. I mean, it's variable, certainly across the world and across Europe in terms of what that electronic experience is like. I'm from the UK. I'm very familiar with going for an appointment and seeing a big physical file of paper and stickers that will get transported from place to place. And I'm interested from your perspective, from the human side of it, rolling out your technologies to radiologists or indeed other imaging specialists, and then all the admin staff that would need to be in that flow. What's the sort of there's a lot of work to do to, that sits in the word transformation, to get that change in place. As technologies, we can sort of think about it in nice stages, but there's a lot of human change that needs to happen to facilitate that.
Yeah. So where we are right now, and where we also still struggle across the radiology industry, at least, and it's true, I think, for many other areas in the healthcare system, is what we call workflow integration, right? So if you imagine you are a radiologist, you sit in your office, typically it's dark. Sometimes you have more than one screen. It's very crowded. Yeah, a lot of different systems from different providers. You look maybe at the breast screening, you look at the brain CT. So typically it's ideal if you only have your one screen and everything is there, and you have a level of automation that is in the background providing you the right image reading support. Yeah, so the right app for your brain scan, the right app for your chest CT, the right app for your knee. If we can achieve that, it's just a small piece of image evaluation by the radiologist. It's a big step forward, because what we see, radiologists are overloaded with work. We have still yearly increasing rates of image volume. We have less staff. We have a high burnout danger in that profession that we see across the globe. So when we can just make that part easy and enjoyable from our customer perspective, the radiologist, it's a big step forward. And then automatically putting the patient in focus here, the patient will benefit, because you might get an earlier appointment, because the workflow allows maybe not just to have the visit of 10 patients per hour or per day, but maybe of 15. So that's what we call workflow efficiency in all dimensions. And if you then consider you have a follow-up scan, yeah. So what happens with the old images? How are they accessible? If you are lucky, you go to the same radiology department, but maybe in between you have moved. Yeah, you live now in a new city. We still see that we hand out CDs. Look at the latest MacBook or whatever laptop. Can you put a CD in there? No. Yeah, so empowering even the patient here. I have my data on my CD, but I can even not read it. So these are, again, hate to say it, back to the basics. But now what can be a solution? A solution can be, and being just here at another big event in Las Vegas these days, where we have the Google Next and see announcements regarding agent spaces that already start. So technology already starts to bridge certain silos of technology. So we might have certain data in the one space, other data in the other space. AI agents can help us, obviously right now already, to bridge, which we have not seen a year ago or 2 years ago. And what Lavanya was saying also, the speed how technology is accelerating right now is incredible. And so maybe we will see solutions that simply fill the gaps that we have, but we need to understand again what is the focus and how we can empower the patient as the final goal in the whole workflow.
It's interesting, isn't it? How, for anyone who's watching this and wondering about the definition of what an agent is in the current sense, it's where a software component has an AI element within it, usually a large language model, that makes decisions about the outputs and the outcomes. So it sort of decides the next steps. So there's a number of platforms that are using this to orchestrate that you'll go into, and it'll decide some things, maybe your tasks or the workflow you referred to earlier. But something that's interesting that you said there, we talked a bit about data silos and the back to basics. How do you feel about the interoperability standards? Because it seems to me that, from moving, into a kind of a regulatory sort of framework, there's things that need to exist in order for these things to talk to each other, in order for the kind of like the layer of orchestration and the fun stuff to be able to be effective on the top.
Very, very interesting question. And let me try to answer it first from two different angles. First, starting with the more difficult angle, it's the development of tools. So when we talk about the development of tools, we still have the barrier, we need data for development. For an imaging algorithm, maybe for the hearing device, for a doctor note taker care system, whatever it is, we need data for that. And here we have high barriers. It is still that roughly 80% or even above 80% of AI development projects are late because of having issues accessing data or having the right data quality. And that make it very is making it very costly, long timelines, and a low rate of success here and there. So on the other side, once the tool is developed or the solution is developed, it's regulated, we have then the next situation of the continuous improvement of the device or software as a medical device, which again has to do with data. And we need constant data feedback and need to have the informed consent by the patient that we can loop in these feedbacks and continuously improve the performance of the tool. Think about the radiologist or any medical doctor from time to time has to do a retraining or reaccreditation. Yeah, they need to collect their training points to stay certified. So far, we have not talked about that in the AI field at all. So what happens if AI is aging? But the element that is hindering from today's perspective from the regulation is using the data or having the right data access. And GDPR in Europe has a very good intention, I would say, also as a patient, yeah, good intention behind, but how we have translated it into daily routine is horrible. And I think here we need to start as society to rethink and pivot a little bit and adjust that the data flow is more able than today. Yeah, so the development, the lifecycle management, big problem. But in between, once the tool is rolled out, so when the imaging algorithm is at a workflow, at a radiologist, and is actionable, then the data flow is there, at least from the imaging scanner to the PAC system to the radiologist screen. So this is okay then, yeah. But the piece before and the piece after to keep the tool compliant, this is not good enough solved right now. Long answer.
No, that's fine. I was just, before we get to the sort of final question, I was interested from Lavanya's perspective, if there would, because obviously the AI assisted hearing device, that must have been just as important to cross any regulatory boundaries from a user, physical device testing, but also from a data perspective. I'm just wondering, like, how if you encountered any challenges.
Within the hearing, you're right. There was a lot of data that did go into it, fortunately, because Sonoma does have a lot of its technology out there. We do have a good data set base. But one of the challenges, I think this is across healthcare, maybe across just AI in general, the large language models, the concept of bias data.
Yeah.
Right? It is across the board. It's so from a hearing aid perspective, one of the examples is our data tends to be biased because majority of our users are about a certain age group. That said, we do have a huge subsection of individuals who are who have had hearing loss much earlier or since birth. So how do you kind of ensure that the new technology addresses the lifestyle needs? Because that's where we are positioning the new devices. It's a lifestyle improvement technology because you want to go swimming, you want to go to this, you want to do that. It is able to detect what environments you're in and accordingly switch the programs because hearing aids, it's not just about reducing or increasing sound, it's also about allowing you to hear what you need to hear. So there's a
Yes.
bias there, right? Of
Ambient sounds that
ambient sounds and so on. You do not want to not hear a car honking behind you while you're when you're driving, right? So there's bias there from a different
yeah.
lens, about a little bit more around the age-related lens. But there's bias in all kinds of data. Within healthcare, we find that
I'm saying
most,
nothing.
let's be honest, most of our healthcare data are a very specific subsection of the human population. Women tend to
Yeah.
be at the lower end of receiving the benefits of that kind of data bias because a lot of our trial information is with have men in them, right? So there is a lot of discrepancy there from the bias. Um, I'm not sure if you remember this, but I think it was 2015-16, where Twitter launched their AI chatbot that was started posting by itself. It was meant to be a positive, sending out positive messages into the universe. But this chatbot learns from Twitter's LLM, which is based on what people are posting. And very soon that chatbot became a very racist fastest chatbot and had to be brought down within days, not within years or months. Within days, it had learned how to be rude and racist, and they had to bring it down. And therein
Yeah.
lies the challenge. Garbage in, garbage out. And how
Yes.
the garbage in is our responsibility, or rather, our responsibility, making sure we put the right.
And there's an interesting case. Yeah. Yes. There's an interesting case as well in the US about people who are reoffenders to crime, and it was more the case that if you looked at some data, then you found more because you were looking. A bit like, if you go to a deprived area and you look for crime, you'll find it because because you're looking. So in a sense, you've got the problem of the bias of the data, and then you've got the problem or the side effect of the bias of the algorithm itself. You apply it, it's going to find stuff. So that can lead to a sort of cyclical nature. But yeah, we have multiple challenges. But I was interested. I mean, one of the things that we've looked at today, we've looked at the data aspects, we've looked at the problems of transformation, and I really liked, Lavanya, your kind of like three, sort of like you did the triangle shape as you were describing it, that brings in all these different factors to try that, because you need to consider, where it's a synthesis, isn't it, of all these things together, and the only way we're going to try and go forward is to get behind certain things and push it, and other times it's just like hold on and pull it back, and it's that common sense. Now I just wondered, just before we move to some of the questions that we've been receiving, just very quick final thoughts on this from both of you. Lavanya, if we stick with you for that first.
If I had to leave you with one thing, which I have observed, and it try to bring it into the interventions I design, is I have found that in the last 4 months, the concept of AI ethics, responsibility, and regulation has gone from a very theoretical, because in the past it was a theoretical exercise, has become a very practical, immediate need, and we are a little behind when it comes to how do you regulate AI. As Guido said, the acceleration of the technology is going, and we are catching up. And now we're going from theory to practice, and we still have a lot of way to catch up. In such a situation, the role of the human in the center is even more immense than any other technological innovation that has come before this. If you're able to go ahead with the concept of the responsibility, the regulation, the self-regulation, the self-responsibility, and the self-driven ethical behavior, if you're able to induce that into every individual in a format, in a corporate setting, for instance, your clinicians, for instance, if you're able to focus on that as the technology goes at full speed, and we are thinking about what a bigger governance structure should look like, and we're trying to figure that part out, if you're able to instill that at the human level, it can help manage some of the negative spillovers of everything else that's happening around. So that would be my final word. That do not forget the human, because there's a lot of power in managing the speed at which we're going.
Thank you. Guido.
And also absolutely keeping the human in the loop around everything. Another big thing I would like to add is, first of all, think big. So we should not slow down and really even think bigger and more bold, because then we can overcome the hurdles we have described, only some of it today. And another one is the whole question of reimbursement. So if you have a medical device where AI is part of the medical device, I think there's a good path forward. If the AI itself is the product, this is not solved. Yeah. So and leaving it like that to have sufficient time for Q&A, but let's have this in mind, that also reimbursement of pure AI solutions is a situation that is not fully solved. We have a high number of regulated healthcare AI applications, and again, 80% out of that are in the field of radiology, but not all of them really make profit, and that's then also a question: who is paying for that?
Right. Thank you. And we've had a wonderful linking throughout this that's quite naturally occurred, because we'll move now into the Q&A section, and the first question that's been upvoted the most, which I'll start with you, Guido, but I would love both of your viewpoint on this, is what aspect of AI in healthcare do you believe will have the most transformative impact in the next 5 years? And I'm giving it straight to you, Guido, because you said to think bigger. So interested in your view on that.
Yeah, it's for me definitely it's the medical imaging field, and here the potential to connect medical imaging with all the other patient data we have. So going multi-omics or also radiomics in particular, to also look from a complete different angle on maybe a cancer patient. So right now we still have the situation that we have a 2D measurement following maybe research criteria for most of the cancer types, but maybe it's better to measure the full volume of the tumor. Yeah, so the total tumor burden maybe in the whole body, and then to see if treatment is functioning or not. And from that perspective, the AI support for the radiologists in particular can do a lot. And then we will have much better treatment decisions, and are very close to what we call today precision medicine. And this, I think, is what we significantly will see over the next 5 years, and where I'm very happy to be part of that journey and influence for better patient outcome.
And Lavanya, what do you think is going to be the most impactful AI application technology, whichever, in the next 5 years?
I definitely agree with Guido with regards to the speed of innovation. within the healthcare space, irrespective of the specific vertical, will be, I think, again, unprecedented. What I do, a big shift in dynamics or the paradigm shift I really see happening is the closer accessibility of the normal human person, the patient, with being able to access and have greater control over their health. It's happening already. You hear stories or you read stories of individuals putting their health data, they had been undiagnosed for years, and they're putting their health data into generative AI and being able to find diagnoses that have gone under the radar for so many years. The accessibility of the normal person to this kind of immense wealth of information in a normalized language that they understand will be something, a shift you will see. And I believe the paradigm shift then will come the intersection or the interaction between healthcare and the patient. It's going to evolve significantly because both will come empowered with data and information from their own lenses.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because at the moment, one of the problems that we have that doesn't appear to be going away is the problem of hallucination. So you're absolutely right that we can go into one of these models and say, here's this medical to the information, maybe some blood tests or something, and it can seem to make sense of it, and it's not clear whether it's what it's giving you is accurate or not. But that's just brings even more into focus the points that we've both been making about we've all been making rather about having the human in the loop and testing that enough so that problem in the next 5 years goes away. And just moving to the next question, I'll give this one to you, Guido. How do you convince stakeholders to invest in the long-term vision of AI when short-term ROI is unclear? And do you know what? I think you could apply that to any emerging technology, to be honest. Yeah. That's the perennial problem.
Right. But I think especially here, it starts again, customer in the center. So what is not only the customer need, but the demand. So demand is also where's the motivation and the willingness to pay. And along these lines, then having smaller steps, I think, even if we should go bold and big, that's the vision, but having proof points along the way and create confidence. Yeah, demonstrate that there is a positive benefit for the participants in a certain AI solution. And then I think step by step, this will be catalyzing and really be transformative. But we need to have the proof points and we need to positively talk about the proof points. So the successes we have, but also the failures, and explain also why we failed or learning from that and explain that to the society, to the community. And I think then the way forward will be clear. That's my answer.
I think that the lean movements and the agile movements have helped a lot in terms of breaking things down into small, discrete chunks and allowing this idea of pivoting so that when something doesn't work, you say, okay, we've learned from this. We can now change direction and go to that, as opposed to pretending that you can think of it all in one go and you've got everything right, because either through the development of the product or when you hit the market, things change and you will change your mind. And exactly to your point, success breeds success, doesn't it? In terms of proving something works, proving its value, and then moving up. And then you just get into the sort of like the corporate adoption problem that we talked about earlier. And there's a question coming, just conscious of time, for Lavanya specifically. Do you have mechanisms to anonymize voices? And can you comment on that?
Very interesting. Anonymized voices.
Yeah. There must be a reason why somebody's asking that, but I'm guessing that it might be to do with I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it, as to what the reason for that might be? Because obviously, when you're trying to facilitate and replicate the human experience, we don't currently have the ability to anonymize voices. So
It is very interesting because depending on what this person meant, if it was truly about literally anonymizing voices. Ironically, what I found was when we did deliver interventions, be it training or upskilling or communication around the new technology or around AI-enabled smart hearing aids, people still preferred that communication to come from a person. So I'll give you a very tangible example. One of our communications we gave, because we are a global company, of course, and we speak multiple languages across. When we were communicating about the technology to our audiologist, we provided two options. One is to have the specifically even the testimonials, where the individual is trying it on and going on a run, and like in real time they were asked to record their diaries, and we provided two options. One was, would you like to hear the real sound, like in their native language, and we transcribe it in your language, versus would you like to have it AI generated voices, which actually was not too bad because it tried to mimic the individual's voice and language and so on. And 95% of the time, folks prefer to have the original content with the subscript in their local language. It's the same today, right? I mean, you have these AI-assisted chatbots or calling systems when you call in. And how many times have you thought, I would just want to speak to a person?
Yes.
Right? And it goes to Guida's point, at the end of the day, depending on what you're trying to influence, a human voice might just be a stronger pull.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, have you found that just thinking about this as sort of anonymizing voices, and it made me think about whether when considering this or something like this, what are the sort of ethical challenges that you've encountered? Deploying responsible tech is a sort of a byword and having ethical and AI frameworks are things that we've seen people do as a box ticking exercise. But it'll be interesting into what considerations you've had to make, Lavanya.
This is really interesting because within our own organization, we were still kind of learning in ourselves, adopting and learning as we go. This was late last year. And one was transparency. So you would start off with a disclaimer that we have used so on and so on, and getting consent. So the individuals who are the original source had to provide consent. This again goes to the concept of self-regulated behaviors, because at that point in time, our organization had not come out with guidelines around the usage of AI within the organization. So we had to take a step back and think about, if I was a user, what would I want to have in place, right? So consent and complete disclosure were some of the things which actually Guido brought this point earlier, which is trust, created trust. It created trust with our experts. It created trust with our hearing care professionals, because there was a sense of transparency that what you're seeing now has been AI modified. And every person would like to know than not know.
Yeah.
Maybe not sure if there's another question, but building on that, because there's another, I think, very interesting learning that we had, talking also about anonymized data, which are key for AI development in radiology. First thing is, if you have a head MRI, you need to build in certain triggers that you cannot reconstruct with a 3D reconstruction, because then you see the face of the person, which is not okay. But another very interesting thing is data deduplication. So duplicates that you have in data sets that you simply buy. Yeah, so you buy data from different data brokers. And what we have found out with really good research by our team is, and we publicated on that as well recently, that we find duplicates in public data sets. And this is something, so also the level of quality, they are all anonymized. So we don't know if this is Mr. or Ms. Meyer or Miller, but we can see it on a pixel or voxel level. It's the same person.
Yeah.
And then you have a bad outcome of your model training, for instance. And so these are small tricks. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we find this in things like credit score checking, that people will identify with different versions of their name, and you've got to like match up, exactly who's who. But just like last question, and perhaps you could answer the question, maybe like leave us with your final thoughts if you would like. But the question from the audience is, what AI use cases in the industry have caught your attention in 2025? So what excites you right now? So Lavanya.
Well, something that excites me, because I have been in discussion with this for a few years, is the concept of virtual patient. And truly, this concept comes with great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. Applies so much in this context. I remember a couple of years ago, while I was still at one of my previous companies, I led a global conference for clinical scientists on the topic of virtual patient. And here we are today, still talking about it. And I know in preparation for the conference, this has been in the works for so long. The potential is immense with AI and the speed and the acceleration at which we're going. But this also brings the biggest concern of data biases, data usage, applications, accessibility, so on, as investment, as Guido rightly pointed out, because there's so many fractions that you need to think about in this space. So I'm very excited to see the development of that and the evolution. I am cautiously optimistic that that we will be able to catch up when it comes to ethics and responsibility and governance around this at the same speed in the next couple of months, dare I say, and not years.
Yeah. Thank you, Lavanya, and thanks so much for today. And Guido, your last thoughts and what's exciting you for 2025?
Yeah, so very fresh experience from beginning of this week. The remastering of the old movie, The Wizard of Oz. Mind blowing what I have seen live here in Las Vegas. How imaging technology is capable with the different AI models. And that is bridging back to what Lavanya was saying, the synthetic human, for clinical development in particular and research. So I think there's a big step forward in that regard.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Guido. Thank you, Lavanya. It's been a fascinating hour. And this is one of these topics that I feel that we could have looked at for, well, I mean, an hour is not too long. There are so many aspects to this. There is the possibility. There is the technical possibility, the human responsibility. There is the need to be able to know when to push and the need to know when to pull back. But we can't escape that something that with AI across all industries is that we have to have the basics in place. We need to have the data ecosystems. We need to prevent and join up some of the silos. We need to do that in a way that's responsible, secure, and we need to work at interoperability standards. I'm always amazed at the standards body world. In a sense, the standards are great. Let's have lots of them. We actually need as few standards as possible to actually make them work and to build the basics that we need to have in order to put some of these things on top. But hopefully we've started to address or open up in your mind some of the ideas of the reality, the possibility, and maybe sort of dealt with some of the hype, although the hype has an energy of its own. But I would love to hear your feedback on this talk, and there's a QR code right there in front of you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. It's been fascinating, and like I say, would look forward to your feedback. Thanks again to Lavanya. Thanks again to Guido. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Dave, for the moderation. Thanks, everyone.